Hey there, thanks for sneaking in at this odd hour. It's nice to know I'm not the only one awake, making questionable life choices. Get comfortable, preferably in a position you won't regret in 5 minutes, sand. You feel it before you hear it, that cursed slice of night when the world isn't quite asleep, but it certainly isn't awake. The timber groaning overhead sounds like an old man settling into his bones for the last time. Somewhere in the thatch, mice are whispering about your questionable life choices, their tiny feet rustling like dry leaves. Every single relative you share this flattened straw mat with has somehow migrated onto your half, a sprawling ecosystem of elbows and knees. The hearth is just a graveyard of smoldering embers, and your only light is a sputtering candle stub that looks one stiff breeze away from retirement. Welcome to the forgotten hour, that strange, quiet dread between sleeps where nothing happens and somehow everything does. But before you get too comfortable in this pre-dawn gloom, let's take a moment. You know the drill. A gentle tap on that new hype button YouTube just rolled out does wonders for little storytellers like me, helping to push through the algorithm's murky waters. And while you're at it, a like and a subscribe would be lovely, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet history. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's a strange comfort knowing who else is drifting off with us across this spinning globe. Now, get comfortable. Let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You open your eyes, not because you're rested, but because someone outside is yelling about a goose, a single goose, as if one defiant bird could justify this level of pre-dawn drama. You stare at the rafters, which are layered in the kind of dust-soft light that makes them look ancient and tired. The frostbitten air seeps into your bones, a damp chill that weighs down your thoughts before you've even had a chance to form them. It's still dark, not the thick, velvety dark of midnight, but the smudged, reluctant gray that hints at a morning that's in no hurry to arrive. You wonder if this is morning or just a less committed version of night. You shift under a blanket of coarse wool, a textile possibly woven from regret and sheep's judgment, and instantly regret it, and elbow your brothers, your grandmothers, jabs you sharply in the ribs. In this huddled mass of shared body heat, personal space is a theoretical concept. You hold your breath, trying to decipher whether the lump pressed against your leg is a human, the family goat who occasionally wanders in, or a heap of winter laundry. Either way, it smells faintly of damp earth and feet. The fire is out, of course. No one bothered to feed it after supper, and it's now sulking in the hearth like a teenager asked to do a chore. You consider getting up to poke it back to life, but that would mean leaving the warmth of the collective body pile and crossing the frozen stretch of floor known locally as the Valley of Bad Decisions. Your toes are already numb. You give one a wiggle to confirm its existence. Nothing. You mourn its loss briefly and move on. The rooster hasn't crowed, and you're not sure he ever will again. He's been moody since Candlemas, and you suspect he's unionizing. Last week, he only crowed after being bribed with barley. Yesterday, he just screamed once and went back to his perch. This morning, so far, only a heavy silence hangs over the coop. Somewhere in the village, a dog barks at absolutely nothing, then barks again just to confirm it. Another voice joins the goose yeller, this one higher-pitched and deeply insulted. The goose honks in reply, defiant and unrepentant. You hear a splash, followed by a string of curses that would make a sailor blush. You roll over slowly, trying not to wake the entire ecosystem on the family bed, and succeed only in shifting someone's knee deeper into your hip. A noise escapes your lips, something halfway between a whimper and a prayer. This isn't a new day. This is the in-between, the sacred stretch of time where the world is neither asleep nor awake. This is the hour where thoughts wander sideways, where dreams have finished their performance, and guilt starts seeping in for things you haven't even done yet. This is first waking. It tastes like ash and old porridge, and the breath of the person next to you, who apparently feasted on onions in their sleep. You sit up just enough to peek over the edge of the blanket. Shapes shift in the gloom. Your mother is still snoring like a blessed ox. Your youngest sibling, the one who collects beetles and questionable ideas, is curled up with a rag doll missing half its face. You once asked what happened to the other half. He told you, fire and betrayal, then refused to elaborate. The roof groans again, louder this time, as if trying to get your attention. You stare upward and make a silent deal with it. Hold out until spring, and you won't tell anyone about the hole in the back corner that drips directly into your uncle's ear when it rains. The roof doesn't respond, but a mouse scurries across a beam, its tail twitching with what looks like disapproval of your negotiation tactics. You blink slowly. The candle stub on the stool beside the bed is a pathetic thing, but you light it anyway with the flint your father leaves tied to the bedpost in case of midnight bandits or aggressive pies. The flame sputters, wheezes, and then flickers to life like an old man settling in to gossip. You hold the light up, casting lantern gold shadows that dance and twist on the walls. The room looks the same as it always does in this hour, haunted and slightly confused. The walls lean in one direction, as if they've finally given up resisting the wind. A pot hangs over the hearth, blackened and mysterious, containing either yesterday's soup or something that crawled in during the night to die dramatically. You decide not to check. Outside, the goose chase has escalated into what sounds like a small-scale turf war. You hear someone shout, "Unhand me, you feathered demon," followed by a squonk and another definite splash. You smile for the first time today. Back in the house, someone turns over and mutters a name you don't recognize. You hope it's just a dream. You stand, finally, slowly, like someone rising from the grave, more out of duty than desire. Your knees crack, your shoulders whine. The floor is exactly as cold as you feared. You shuffle to the window really, more of a hole with ambitions and peek through the waxed cloth nailed over it. The sky is a thick, bruised purple. The trees are still. The world holds its breath. You don't know why you're awake. Not really. No one does. All you know is that you've always woken like this, stuck in the crack between two sleeps. You shiver, then pull your cloak of coarse wool around your shoulders. It smells of herbs and wood smoke. You grab a crust of bread, hard enough to be questionable, and chew it thoughtfully while your breath fogs in the flickering candlelight. The goose outside lets out one final, triumphant honk, and you nod to yourself. Whatever this hour is, whatever name it goes by, it belongs to you now, and to the goose, apparently, but mostly to you. The hearth is cold, but the cottage is colder. Not the kind of chill that nips politely at your toes, but the kind that wraps around your spine like a wet eel and settles in for a long stay. You can see your breath hovering in the dim glow, a fleeting ghost trying to escape. The fire gave up sometime in the night, burned down to a sulk, and now the only heat in the room radiates from the tangled human disaster lumped under the main blanket. You shuffle past them, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of elbows, knees, and general snoring hostility. Your father's arm is thrown across your sister's face. Your cousin is somehow upside down. Someone's foot is in the butter crock again. You consider relieving yourself, but the thought of stepping outside into the frost-crusted dark, of unlatching the door with fingers that barely remember circulation, is enough to send you retreating back into the lantern-gold shadows like a guilty raccoon. Besides, the outhouse is behind the shed is behind the goat pen, and the goat is probably awake. He's been waiting. You've seen it in his eyes. Instead, you stare at the wall and pretend not to hear the mice. They're up, of course, scratching and scrabbling in the thatch, probably discussing you. You imagine one of them sitting upright, arms crossed, judging your entire bloodline. They're louder than they have any right to be. It's hard not to take it personally when a mouse sounds disappointed in your life choices. The blanket you've wrapped around your shoulders is stiff from smoke and use, smelling vaguely of stew, sweat, and a life spent making questionable decisions. You clutch it tighter and step over the dog, who is not your dog, but the village dog, who decided this was his home last autumn and refuses to acknowledge anything to the contrary. He's sprawled by the door like a furry sack of defiance. The floorboards creak under your feet with a specific volume of betrayal. One of your siblings groans. Another lets out a sigh so dramatic it probably echoed in the next village. You pause, holding your breath. The heavy silence returns, broken only by the mouse orchestra and the wind knocking politely at the shutters, as if to remind you that yes, it's still horrible outside. You tiptoe toward the hearth, not with any real hope of rekindling warmth, but because standing still makes the cold sink deeper into your marrow. The smoldering embers glow faintly, one or two clinging to life like stubborn old men refusing to leave the tavern. You prod them with a stick. They hiss in protest, unimpressed. You mutter something unholy under your breath and retreat, defeated by fire and circumstance. This is the hour no one talks about. The hour between sleep and sleep, between dark and not quite dawn, when nothing is required of you except existing, which already feels like too much. It's the hour of regret, vague hunger, and bladder negotiation. You sit on the edge of the bed, which isn't so much a bed as a platform of shared suffering. Your little brother murmurs something about fish and kicks your ankle. You consider kicking him back, but remember, he bit you last week during a pillow disagreement. You sigh instead, the kind of deep sigh that could power a small windmill. No one notices. That's fair. You glance toward the window. There's no light yet, only the pale suggestion that somewhere far away the sun is considering tying its sandals. The sky is a smear of gray indifference. You hate it a little, but you also understand. You wouldn't rise either if you didn't have to. Your mother snorts awake briefly, rolls over, and resumes snoring with renewed commitment. The baby whimpers and settles again, drooling audibly onto a shared pillow that smells of hair and secrets. You've memorized every sound in this cottage. The sharp crack of the drying beam, the creak of the old stool, the way the wind sometimes moans through the thatch, like a ghost regretting its life choices. Nothing is new, and everything is slightly worse than yesterday. You think about the rooster. Where is he? Maybe he finally got tired of being ignored and moved to a monastery. It wouldn't be the first animal in this village with strong labor opinions. The oxen once staged a sit-in for better hay. Outside, something thumps. Probably the goat, possibly the goose. You hope it's not the pig again. She's clever and mean, and still hasn't forgiven you for last spring when you accidentally fed her a mitten. You only had one, and your hand never quite recovered. You walk to the door, touch the cold metal latch, consider your life, and step back. Not yet. You'll wait until someone else breaks first. It's the silent agreement every morning. Whoever gives in and goes outside becomes the designated hero who defrosts the water bucket. You are not a hero. You are a reasonable person with a healthy fear of moonlit frost. You return to the corner near the hearth, curl into the blanket, and pretend you're a log. You breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and try not to think about anything, really. The mice are still whispering. You hear one sneeze, and in that moment, as you close your eyes and drift into the in-between, somewhere between prayer and insult, between the cold floor and your brother's snoring, you accept the truth. You will not pee, not yet, but you will complain about it loudly later. You light a candle stub, not because you need to seethe. There's nothing worth looking at, but because it feels strange sitting alone in the dark. The flame sputters, casting just enough of a dim glow to remind you how dusty everything is. You watch it wobble, nervous and small, like it's scared of what it might reveal in the lantern gold shadows. You are, too. The shadows stretch and twist, not threatening, just nosy. One looks like a hunched man with a big nose until it shifts and becomes a ladle. Another one by the ceiling twitches. You tell yourself it's just the wind whispering through the walls. You tell yourself a lot of things during the not quite night, like how the mouse you saw earlier definitely isn't plotting your downfall, like how you're fine. A cough echoes through the wall, raspy and insistent. It belongs to Widow Merrill, who sleeps with 3 cats and a sack of dried leeks. The cough continues, pauses, then resumes, as if narrating a story only she understands. You hear a cat yowl, followed by a soft thud. Somewhere nearby, a pot crashes. You freeze. The candle flame jumps. A heavy silence follows, the kind that presses against your ears. No one moves, no one investigates. That's the rule. During this part of the night, you let things fall. If you intervene, you risk waking someone who might make you do something about it, and worse, talk to you. You pull your blanket of coarse wool tighter, feeling suddenly like a child again, half afraid of the dark, half convinced it's more honest than the light. Your mother always said the night has layers. Evening is for meals and bickering over firewood. Midnight is for dreams and stillness. But this time, this in-between slice of dark is different. It's quieter than it should be, yet more crowded, like time is just loitering until morning. You remember once, years ago, waking at this hour to find your grandmother sitting at the table with bread and cheese, staring into a candle like she was expecting it to confess something. She just cut you a slice and said, "Sometimes the soul gets fidgety." Now, years later, you understand. Maybe not the soul part, but definitely the fidgety. A creak from the loft above suggests your uncle, or maybe the rat you've given up trying to tell apart by sound has shifted. Someone lets out a slow, drawn-out sigh that says, "I'm awake, but don't you dare talk to me." It's answered by the sound of teeth grinding. You step carefully across the room and sit on the stool next to the window, a hole in the wall with a bit of waxed cloth nailed over it. You lift the corner and peek out. The sky is still dark, but less like ink and more like watered down wine. The stars are fading. Down the lane, you can just make out the shape of Griever's chimney. Smoke is already curling from it. Of course it is. Griever, the baker, never sleeps, or at least not when people are supposed to. He always wakes early to curse at yeast and scream at the dough like it insulted his mother. Right now, he's probably elbow deep in flour, humming the same off-key hymn he sings every morning. It's comforting knowing someone else is up. It's a sign of the new times, really. Since the great sickness swept through, there are fewer hands for every task, which means more work and more opportunity for those who remain. Griever's ambition is reshaping the village, one loaf at a time. You tear off a corner of your crust from earlier and chew it absently. It's dry, but not unkind. The chewing helps. There's something about bread at this hour. It doesn't ask questions. You think about slicing some cheese, but the floor groans, a warning, so you sit still instead. Behind you, your cousin mumbles something about frogs. You don't look. It's better not to. Everyone dreams strange things during this time. You once dreamt you married a fish, not a mermaid, a fish. It gave a speech at the wedding about duty and algae. You woke up hungry and slightly insulted. Isn't that just like history, full of strange, unexplainable moments? The candle burns low. You tilt it slightly to make the wax drip evenly. This is the part of the night no one talks about, but everyone knows. You've heard women whisper about it at the well, their voices low. You've heard old men mutter about it by the ale barrel, claiming they used this time to sharpen their wits. Even the priest once mentioned that sometimes the Lord whispers in the dark. He said it like a warning. You don't hear whispers, just the usual thumps and sighs. A rooster somewhere, prematurely ambitious, lets out a confused croak and gives up. Time is, for now, suspended. You sit, candle flickering, bread gone, and feel it all. The hush, the hum, the peculiar warmth of solitude in a room full of people. The shadows are quieter now. The cough has stopped. Even the mice seem thoughtful. You don't know how long you sit like this. Eventually, the dark begins to change again. But for now, this moment is yours. Yours and everyone's, but mostly yours. You're not alone. You never are. The walls may be thin, the roof may leak, and the bed may host more limbs than a battlefield surgeon's tent. But solitude is a luxury you've never known. Even now, in the middle of the second night, the wakeful watch settles over the village. You can feel them, the others, awake like you in that quietly stubborn way that refuses to be called insomnia, because no one has invented that word yet. They call it restlessness, or the Lord's hour, or the I'll just sit here and stare into the smoldering embers until I forget what I was thinking about time. Across the village, in the low stone house that always smells faintly of burned raisins, Griever, the baker, is poking his coals. You can hear the distant clang of his peel against the oven, followed by a low curse. He's been up since before you lit your candle. Maybe he never went to bed. Maybe he sleeps, standing up like a disgruntled horse. 2 huts down, the midwife is awake, too. Her window glows with a dim, flickering orange. She has that look in her eyes, like she's seen the inside of too many people, and none of them were impressive. You lean back against the rough timber wall, the grainy wood pressing into your spine. The cold is less harsh now, more like a dog that's too tired to bark, but still wants you to know it disapproves of your choices. Your feet are tucked beneath you, the coarse wool blanket wrapped twice, once for warmth, once for emotional support. The candle's flame trembles, as if it, too, is trying to stay awake. Your father shifts, lets out a snore that sounds like a philosophical disagreement with gravity, and then settles again. He won't wake unless there's thunder or someone drops the soup pot. Your mother is quieter, though her breathing has the rhythm of someone who's definitely listening, even while unconscious. You suspect she has a sixth sense for knowing when someone is about to steal jam. And then, of course, there's the blacksmith. Somewhere near the edge of the village, he's snoring loudly, steadily, like the world depends on him keeping time with his sinuses. Some claim it's a forest spirit, others say it's just his nose. Either way, it's dependable. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to listen better. The village is alive in its stillness. Footsteps creak on distant floorboards. A shutter clicks open, then closed. A child coughs. A kettle hisses. Someone somewhere mutters, "Just one more row." And you imagine the village weaver, stitching cloth and quiet judgment into every loop. It's strange how comforting it is, knowing everyone else is up to. Not talking, not gathering, just awake separate but together. It makes the dark feel less like an absence, and more like a companion, a shared understanding that sleep isn't the only way to rest. Sometimes, just sitting with your thoughts, a dog barks once, then again, in that particular tone that means fox or absolutely nothing. The village breathes, not in harmony, but in chorus. Everyone pretending to sleep, everyone failing. You think about what people do in this hour. Griever bakes, the midwife sews, the priest, you assume, prays, though you once caught him pacing in the cemetery, whispering to a headstone like it owed him money. Traditional authority is being questioned these days. Even the priest seems to be looking for answers in unusual places. The old woman in the corner house talks to her dead husband. You sit, you think. You wonder if it's always been this way. If people in castles and caves and distant cities also find themselves sitting with crusts of bread and candle nubs, wondering why their minds won't shut up. You bet they do. You bet someone in a palace right now is wrapped in 15 layers of imported linen, thinking about goats for no reason at all. Your thoughts drift, as they always do, to chores, to people, to that one time you said something stupid, and everyone definitely still remembers. To bread, mostly bread, if you're honest. You wonder if it's too early to sneak a piece from the larder. You calculate the distance. The floor creaks are a problem. The dog might snitch. Your mother definitely will. Even in her sleep, you stay put. The candle leans low, wax pooling like it's trying to escape. You blink slowly, not tired, but not awake in any meaningful sense. The wall presses cold against your shoulder. The room breathes around you, full of sleeping bodies and wakeful minds. And somewhere, not far, another candle flickers in another window. You're not alone. You never are. History isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps like yours, moving quietly through the dark. You chew a root. It tastes like the floor of the pig pen had opinions and got boiled. The herbalist gave it to you with a smile that felt more like a dare. She said it would calm your humors and usher you gently into the warm embrace of restful slumber. What it's done is coat your tongue in regret and make your teeth feel like they've been scolded. You keep chewing because she also said you have to work through the bitterness, and you believed her. Mostly because she has a lot of jars and once threatened a tax collector with nettle tea. You glance at the pouch she gave you, labeled Peaceful Night in handwriting that looks like it was done mid-seizure. You tried the tea last week. It made your ears itch, and your dreams involve shouting sheep. You tried the lavender sachet, too, stuffed it under your pillow, like she said. But the goat got into the bed while you were outside, and now the goat smells wonderful, and you don't. So now it's the incense. A thin curl of smoke winds toward the ceiling, smelling like damp hay and someone trying to cover up an argument with potpourri. You breathe it in like it might help, like the fourth time might be the charm. But it's hard to feel mystical when your nose hairs are staging a protest. You try to relax. You really do. You lie back, arms crossed over your chest like you've just been respectfully embalmed, and stare at the dark shape of the rafters. A mouse scurries along one beam, pauses dramatically, then vanishes. You wonder if it's the same one from last week, the one that made eye contact and then stole your crumb like it was making a point. You're not convinced the herbalist didn't send it. Your grandmother insists this is a sacred hour. She calls it the space between breath and waking, when the soul can stretch. You call it the time when your foot falls asleep and your thoughts are just squirrels, she says, to meditate. You say you did. What actually happened was you fell sideways into a bucket, and no one helped for 3 minutes because they thought it was part of the process. You roll onto your side and pull the coarse wool blanket tighter. It's scratchy and smells faintly of cabbage, but it's yours. You try to think calming thoughts. A meadow, a warm breeze, a chicken that respects boundaries. But your brain is already off, running down side paths and asking questions like, did I forget to secure the latch on the pen? And what if soup had legs? You close your eyes and try counting sheep, but the sheep in your head are too clever. They keep unionizing and asking for better hay. The incense sputters and goes out with a hiss, as if even it has lost patience with you. You watch the last tendril of smoke rise, twist, and vanish into the thatch. You consider lighting another, but the last one made your sister sneeze herself awake, and she threw her boot across the room in retaliation. It hit your cousin. He hasn't spoken to anyone since, which some call peaceful and others call ominous. You chew another route just to prove a point. It still tastes like betrayal and wood shavings, but now your jaw is numb, and your stomach is beginning to suspect you've made a mistake. The herbalist says to give it time. She also once said nettles could cure heartbreak, but all it did was give you a rash in places best left unspoken. You remember when she came to the village just after the sickness had passed. She wore a cloak of patchwork moss and had a bag full of dried things that crinkled when she moved. With so many gone, new ideas and new people were circulating more freely. Everyone said she was a gift. You suspect she's more of a long-term experiment. She talks to bees, not in a metaphorical way. You've seen her whisper to them like they're old friends, and once one whispered back. A floorboard creaks as someone rolls over. You freeze, waiting. No one wakes. The room settles again into the hush of shared discomfort. The candle flickers, then steadies. You consider trying one of the other remedies the herbalist left, some kind of ointment made from fermented elderberry and crushed beetle wings. You opened it once. It smelled like boiled socks and regret. You'll pass. Your stomach growls loudly. You're not even hungry, but apparently your internal organs have decided to remind you that you once denied them a third helping of stew. You wonder if the herbalist has a tea for guilt or indigestion, or both. You sigh, long and slow, and it steams into the air like the beginning of a folk song about disappointment. You are not asleep. You are not restful. You are awake and full of root and confusion. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling through the eaves like it's looking for something it dropped. The goat bleats once, probably still wearing the lavender sachet like a fashion statement, probably sleeping better than you. You shift again, trying to find a position that doesn't involve one of your joints crying. Your neck pops. Your shoulder makes a sound that can only be described as medieval. The future is malleable if you dare to act, but right now, you'd just settle for a comfortable past. You close your eyes one more time, telling yourself you'll drift off soon, and maybe you will. Right after you finish this route, your uncle kneels in the corner like he's proposing to the wall. The floor creaks beneath his knees, a sound both tragic and suspiciously crunchy, but he doesn't flinch. His hands are clasped, his eyes shut tight, and he is praying with the intensity of someone who believes heaven is a bit hard of hearing. He starts with forgiveness, then detours into health, then gets specific. Tonight, it's probably his neighbor's goat, or the mole on his back, that he's decided might be prophetic. You've learned not to ask. Across the room, your sister whispers to herself, while drawing on the floor with a charcoal stub from the fire. She traces looping symbols and writes half-remembered dreams in the soot, like she's negotiating with something under the bed. She does this a lot during the second waking. No one stops her. No one wants to find out what happens if you interrupt mid-sigil. One time she drew a circle around your cousin, and he couldn't speak for 2 hours. He says it was a coincidence. You're not convinced. Someone outside is reciting a psalm, a low rhythmic chanting that seeps through the wall like steam. It could be the priest or the miller's wife who once claimed she saw an angel in the flower. It turned out to be the cat covered in ash, but still, your mother sits on her stool by the hearth, not moving, just watching the dying embers. She's wrapped in 3 shawls and holding her mug like it's got all the answers. She says, God hears better when you don't shout. She also says, God prefers honesty over poetry. So she just stares at the smoldering embers like they owe her rent, and occasionally mutters something that might be a request or a complaint. Same thing, really. The bread dough on the table has not risen. It slumps in the bowl like it's been personally insulted. Your older brother leans over it, muttering what might be encouragement or threats. Come on, he says, his voice low. Just a little lift. Don't make me get the vinegar again. You've seen him argue with dough before. He always loses, but never admits it. The bread ends up heavy enough to be used in self-defense, but at least it's warm. Everyone has their ritual for this quiet dread. You sit by the window, forehead pressed to the cold, grainy wood, watching frost collect like thoughts. You don't pray, not the way they do. You just breathe, slow and steady. You think if God listens to anything, it's probably silence or heavy sighs. You've tried talking out loud before. Once, when your best hen died, you sat behind the barn and told the clouds you'd trade your shoes to get her back. Nothing happened. You went inside barefoot. Your mother asked if you were daft. The clouds said nothing. Sometimes, in this hour, you try again. Not the asking part, not anymore, just the talking. You tell the dark what you're worried about, what you remember, what you wish you didn't. The dark doesn't answer, but it doesn't interrupt either. Tonight, your thoughts are crowded. You think about the harvest, about the aching in your hip that wasn't there last winter. You think about the new settlements you can see from the high hill, patches of wildflowers and freshly turned earth where before there was only barren farmland. Since the sickness, there's land for anyone bold enough to claim it. Catastrophe forces opportunity, and ordinary people now dream bigger than before. You think about death, you think about life, you think about bread, and still, the house breathes around you. Your uncle's voice rises, cracking on a desperate syllable. He says, "This is when God listens best, during the between time, when the world is quiet and the mind is too tired to lie." You wonder if that's true. You wonder if God actually prefers the moments no one else does, the awkward, lonely ones. Your sister finishes her soot spell and blows on it softly. The symbols smear. She nods, satisfied. She's probably hexed the entire street or summoned a toad. Either way, she curls back under the blanket like she just finished a night shift. You decide not to step in that spot tomorrow. Your father wakes just enough to clear his throat and roll over. He opens one eye, sees your uncle still kneeling, and lets out a sound that might be a groan or a prayer, depending on your interpretation. Then he's asleep again, mouth open, dreams leaking out. You run your fingers along the windowsill. The wood is splintered but familiar. You trace the same groove you always do, one someone carved 100 years ago. A name, maybe, or a curse, or just boredom. You wonder if they were awake like you, staring into the dark, talking to God, or the floor, or nothing at all. You wonder if they got answers. The candle sputters. You sit, listening to the quiet rhythms of a house, half asleep and half praying, and you whisper to no one in particular, just in case. You build a new fire, because the old one died like a martyr, dramatic, smoky, and way too early. The ashes glare up at you with the quiet resentment of a task half finished. You prod them with the iron poker, hoping they'll spark out of guilt. No such luck, so you start over. You pile kindling like a humble offering, and strike flint like you're trying to insult it into cooperation. The spark lands. The spark dies. You mumble something profane and pretend it was a prayer. When the flame finally catches, it does so with a hiss, like it resents you personally. Smoke curls straight into your face, as if it has opinions about your life choices. You lean back, eyes watering, and blink into the haze. The fire sputters, threatens collapse. Then a miracle lit flickers upright, just enough to look smug. You add a log like a bribe, coaxing it to stay. This is the second fire, the one that doesn't burn for light or cooking, but for the quiet theater of not being alone in the dark. It gives off just enough heat to keep your toes from seceding, and just enough of a dim glow to prove that time is still passing. You watch it like it's a play. Nothing happens. That's the point. Behind you, the blanket pile shifts. A sigh, a snort, the rustle of someone re-entering consciousness unwillingly. Your sibling rises, eyes half open, hair standing in directions unapproved by any god. They look at you like they've caught you committing a crime. "Is it tomorrow?" they ask, their voice thick with sleep and judgment. You shrugged. They nod, satisfied with the ambiguity, then punch you in the leg and go back to sleep. You rub your shin, peaceful, you think, with the deadpan sarcasm of someone who hasn't had a full night's rest since they were 5. The fire crackles louder now, spitting a spark that lands near your foot. You stare at it until it dies, because that's how problems are handled in this house. You poke the log again, not because it needs it, but because it makes you feel like you're participating in an ancient tradition, instead of just waiting for sleep to ambush you again. You think about second sleep, how no one talks about it like it's real, but everyone does it. It's not a luxury, it's a ritual. First sleep is what you collapse into. Second sleep is what you choose. Your uncle once said, second sleep is when the world is closest to truth. You're pretty sure he was drunk, but he had a point. There's something honest about this hour. No one's pretending to be busy. No one's performing competence. It's just you, the fire, and the echoes of a day that isn't quite done being resented. The room settles again. People breathing in various keys, snoring in different rhythms. 6 humans, 2 cats, 1 dog that technically belongs to the neighbor. Everyone accounted for. No one fully awake, no one fully asleep, just floating. You sit closer to the popping embers, letting the heat bite at your fingers. You think about whether it's worth crawling back into the bed. It will be warm, yes, but also full of elbows, and one person who sleep talks in riddles. Instead, you stare at the fire, letting your thoughts unspool. They tangle and loop. You find yourself thinking about soup again, about whether chickens have opinions on reincarnation, about whether second sleep is a kind of reincarnation, just shorter and with less paperwork. You think about the word tomorrow and how slippery it feels right now. This doesn't feel like tomorrow. This feels like the intermission between scenes of a play that's both too long and too familiar. You know your lines. You don't like them, but you'll still say them when the rooster decides you've been horizontal long enough. The dog twitches in its sleep. A cat sneezes. Your grandmother mumbles from her blanket cocoon. It sounds like turnip, but that could mean anything. You decide not to investigate. The fire is safer. A gust of wind howls through the chinks in the door. The flame leans sideways, then recovers. You wrap the blanket tighter. It's the illusion of control that matters. You could be cold with dignity or cold without it, and you're choosing the former. Your eyes grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from agreement. Your body has decided it's time. The second fire has done its job. It's told your bones to soften, your mind to quiet, your heart to stop narrating everything like it's a bard with performance anxiety. You stretch, crack a few joints, and rise. You don't extinguish the fire. You feed it one last scrap of wood and trust it to behave. You crawl back into the shared bed like a spy sneaking into enemy territory. There's a toe where your pillow should be. There's a snore in your ear, but there's warmth, though real, shared warmth. You pull the blanket over your head and breathe in the scent of sleep, and too many people in one room. Tomorrow will come. It always does. But for now, there's second sleep, and you're ready. You've never been a writer, but the night insists you become one. The fire is low, muttering to itself in crackles, and everyone else is either breathing dramatically or pretending to be dead to avoid chores. You sit cross-legged near the embers, balancing a lump of charcoal between your fingers like it's a quill, though it stains your hands and smells faintly of last week's stew. There's no parchment. There is, however, the back of a tax receipt from 3 harvests ago. The ink has faded into a polite suggestion of letters. You flatten it on your knee, careful not to disturb the sock lying beside it. You write slowly, mostly because the charcoal keeps snapping and your handwriting resembles the panicked scratches of a bird attempting calligraphy during an earthquake. The first line is ambitious to my future self. It feels important, grave. Then you immediately undercut yourself by following it with, "Don't forget to feed the pig." She looks at you with judgment. You nod. This feels accurate. Pig eyes are portals to your worst decisions. Someone behind you rolls over with the grace of a collapsing barn. A foot thuds against the floor. You freeze. pretending you're not committing an act of quiet rebellion with your soot-covered note. The foot retreats. A snore resumes. You aren't sure who left the sock here. It's grayish, with a hole at the toe that yawns like it has secrets. You nudge it with your finger. It doesn't move. You're not convinced it's not alive. The ink from the tax receipt starts to bleed through the new writing, creating an accidental poem that reads, 4 chickens owed per unit goat. You decide this is profound. You consider submitting it to the village poet, but he still hasn't forgiven you for rhyming ale with snail last solstice. You stare at your message again. It's not enough. You add, also, don't trust the baker. His bread is soft, but his soul is crusty. The charcoal smudges. You lick your finger and try to fix it, only to smear the entire corner into oblivion. You sigh. The pig will eat this anyway. She has no respect for literature. You wonder briefly what your future self would write back. Probably something like, too late. The pig has learned to open doors. Or, the sock is still watching. You imagine an older version of you, wiser, but still exhausted, flipping this crumpled receipt over and groaning into a pillow made of straw and unmet expectations. These moments linger longer than the years that follow, etched in charcoal and memory. You start a second note. This one begins, stop eating turnips raw. You are not a goat. Then you scratch it out and write, actually, become a goat. They seem happy. You leave that one ambiguous. You hear your grandmother shift in her sleep. She mutters something that sounds like, the geese, no, and then nothing more. You do not question this. You do not want to know what the geese know. You reach for the sock. You don't know why. Maybe it's the hour. Maybe it's the way it just lies there, smug and lumpy. You pick it up. It's damp. That was a mistake. You drop it again. It lands silently, accusingly. You turn your attention back to the paper. There's not much space left. You write, if you marry the tanner's daughter, insist on separate blankets. Then below that, if you don't marry anyone, invest in more socks. The current ones are planning a coup. The ink from the front side, some forgotten complaint about grain storage, has now seeped entirely through. The words layer over each other until they resemble a spell or a warning. You like that. Maybe it will scare off the pig. A thought strikes you. You add one last note. Hide this from everyone, especially the dog. He remembers things. You fold the receipt and tuck it under a loose stone near the hearth. This is your filing system. You have exactly 3 things stored there. A message for future you, half a button, and a very small drawing of a goat that your cousin insists is a map. You lean back, satisfied in the way only someone who has done nothing productive can be. You've left a mark. You've documented your existence in soot and sarcasm. The historians will thank you, or they won't. It's hard to know what the future values. Maybe they'll find your note and interpret it as a religious text. Maybe pigs will be in charge by then. You yawn, the kind that takes your whole face with it. Your legs are numb. Your spine clicks ominously as you stretch. The fire gives a last valiant pop, then sulks into quiet coals. You brush your hands off on your tunic, then wipe your tunic on the sock because, why not? It deserves it. You crawl back toward the blanket pile, careful not to disturb the strategic ecosystem of limbs and snores. You slide into your corner, curl up, and whisper to yourself, don't forget the pig. The sock remains by the fire, damp and ominous. Tomorrow's problem. What seems impossible eventually becomes the new normal, even socks with secrets.